Hello to everyone. Welcome to the first teacher training for the new BC Safe Haven Curriculum Guidelines. We're so glad to have you join us this morning. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to thank the province of British Columbia for funding this project through the Ministry of Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills. As a provincial umbrella association, AMSA acknowledges that BC is on the unceded homelands of First Nations who have stewarded this land since time immemorial. We recognize the privilege that we have as settlers on this land and acknowledge that AMSA's operations are on the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. As an organization, AMSA is committed to creating a safe space for Indigenous voices. And as I share this land acknowledgement, I introduce everyone to introduce yourselves in the chat. Please include your name, your organization, your role, and where you're coming from. If you know whose ancestral and unceded lands you're joining us from today, please feel free to include that as well. Reflect on this land acknowledgement. I just want to take a moment to be grateful for the rain that is giving us a break to the heat and to hope that it provides some provides a break to those who are fighting wildfires in our beautiful land. So our thoughts and hopes are with those who are facing wildfires around their homes and with those who are fighting the fires to protect the people and land. And now I would like to invite the presenters to introduce themselves and share their unique acknowledgement of the land and people, starting with Lisa. Lisa, please go ahead and share and then pass the mic to the next presenter.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. We're really happy to have you here for our first training. I'd like to acknowledge that, my name is Lisa Herrera, and I am the project lead for this Safe Haven Curriculum project. I work at ISS of BC in that capacity. I'd like to acknowledge that I am on the unceded ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh nations. I was very privileged to work on a lesson plan package to help newcomers become aware of the history of Indigenous peoples in these lands. And I feel that giving a land acknowledgement is a small contribution that I can make towards reconciliation. And I pass on to Arthur.
Sure. So I'm a curriculum writer on this program with ISS of BC as well. And I'm likewise coming from speaking to you from the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. I'd like to express gratitude for their stewardship of these lands for thousands of years, and also express my solidarity with Indigenous struggles to continue to care and protect these lands that I love and that I live on as a guest. And how about Maha?
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Maha Sadi. I am a curriculum writer on this project. I would like to acknowledge the Coast Salish nations on whose traditional territories we work to support immigrants and refugees. I am grateful to live, work, and learn on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen-speaking First Peoples, specifically the Songhees and Esquimalt nations. And I'll pass it on to Andrea.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea Leclerc. I represent Diversity Community Resource Society. I'm a content writer on this project. I'd like to recognize I have the privilege of living and working on the unceded traditional territories of the Katzie and Kwantlen First Nations. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Before we dive into the presentation, I want to acknowledge that this project is a collaborative effort. It is part of the BC Safe Haven Resource Network program, which is overseen by AMSA, but which encompasses 7 partners and 4 project streams: capacity building, mental health, public support gathering, and language curriculum resources, the stream which brings this training to you today. 3 organizations are behind the curriculum resources and training: ISS of BC, Diversity Community Resources Society, and the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria have all been part of bringing this project to fruition, and I want to recognize the many hours of work and dedication that have gone into this project. Heading up this stream is Lisa Herrera, and I will pass the mic over to her for our agenda slide. Take it away, Lisa.
Thank you. So I just want to say that the structural framework of this project is based on research, data collection, and conclusions drawn from data analysis and participants' input. And it was informed by feedback from settlement workers, employment specialists, support staff, language educators, and clients from various service providers throughout British Columbia. and additional input was gathered from experts in such fields as mental health, employment, and trauma-informed practices to provide a well-rounded approach. This project aims to develop curriculum guidelines to support English language teachers in meeting the specific needs of BC refugee claimants in their efforts to learn English. Now, some of you have put your information into the chat about who you are. If you haven't already, could you please do that and let us know if you are an ESL teacher in a Safe Haven only class, or if you are an ESL teacher in a LINC class that has Safe Haven clients in your class, or if you have another role, if you're a settlement worker or an employment specialist or a manager in a program, could you please put that into the chat? I've seen a few people in here, but I don't think as many people as are actually in the room.
And we'll thank Kirandeep, Maury, Rana, and Lou Jane for your introductions. Thanks.
Okay, that's great. So we do want to acknowledge that we recognize, we have done surveys with teachers. We recognize that some of you are working in classes that do have only refugee claimants as students, and some of you are working in LINC classes that have refugee claimants mixed in with the newcomers. Today, what you're going to see is an overview of the curriculum guidelines and particularly the principles that inform the guidelines for you to start thinking about as you're choosing materials and planning. When we present the full curriculum, which we hope to be doing in the fall, there will be a full consideration for the different methods of delivery. So the method of delivery where if you're a Safe Haven only instructor or if you are a LINC teacher with Safe Haven clients. So with that in mind, today we're going to give you a short introduction to the BC Safe Haven Curriculum Project. We will talk a little bit about the research findings and mostly the guiding principles, again, that we want you to be focused on. We'll spend quite a bit of time on using the curriculum resources because there are resources that you can use immediately before the full curriculum guidelines are ready for you. And then we will go on to next steps and we will take your questions and hopefully give you some answers towards the end. And I believe I am passing this on to Maha.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, so before we get into the details of this training, it's important to understand who refugee claimants are and how they are different from other refugees in Canada. Some of you may already know this, but for clarity, refugee claimants are people who come to Canada and ask for protection because they fear danger or persecution back home. They are not officially recognized as refugees when they arrive. They must first go through a legal process with the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada to have their claim assessed. The main difference between refugee claimants and other resettled refugees is that refugee claimants ask for protection after arriving in Canada, while resettled refugees are selected and approved through official programs before they arrive, often with government or private sponsorships. Okay, next slide. Now, this is who refugee claimants are. Now we're gonna move to why refugee claimants. Okay, after identifying who refugee claimants are, it is time to discuss the why. According to the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada, it takes a little over 2 years on average to process a refugee claim. While waiting, many claimants struggle to access basic services like language classes. Seeing how tough this can be, the government of British Columbia has recognized the need to improve support for refugee claimants, helping them settle in and become part of their communities while they wait for a decision. The goal of this project is simple. It helps fill that gap by connecting claimants with language services right away, even before their refugee status is confirmed, so they feel less isolated and more included. And next slide, please. Okay, all right. So now we come to our first activity. In this activity, we're going to brainstorm refugee claimants' challenges. Please take a moment to reflect on what refugee claimants students may have experienced before arriving in Canada and what they might still be facing today as they adjust, learn a new language, and search for work. Please use the QR code or the link in the chat to share your thoughts. Okay. Yes, you can see the link, the QR code in the next slide. Okay. All you need to do is to type in a few keywords or short phrases that describe the challenges refugee claimants might be dealing with. All right, so I will give you some time to access the link and yes, type in your ideas about the challenges that refugee claimants are facing.
And while you're doing that, I might take over the screen sharing here so we can take a look at those answers as they come
Yeah,
in.
sure.
Here.
Thank you, Arthur.
So again, the QR code is on the screen, and it might come off the screen for just a half second while I'm taking over, but the link is in the chat as of now. And Maha, can you just confirm? Excellent. Okay, so it does
Yes,
look like
yeah.
some people are getting some ideas here.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the portion of the screen where you can send those keywords is on the right, as you can see here. And now I'm just going to go to the full screen for the word map. And yeah, we see some things we expected to see, of course, arranging accessible childcare, renting an apartment, facing discrimination in all those areas. For sure, great.
And I think you can see that some of these challenges that refugee claimants are facing are very similar to what newcomers face, but some of them are very different. For instance, the uncertainty that I see written here. Newcomers know that they have a place in Canada, whereas refugee claimants, that is still not decided.
For sure, yeah, and we're seeing another phrasing of that as unknown.
Yeah, like the high cost of living, that's true for all newcomers to Canada, and healthcare, the unknown. Yeah, okay, yeah. There are
Feelings of exclusion. is a
very
big
good
one.
points here, very good points.
I do like the acknowledgement there that you can see of how important language is, since that has, enlarged there and been centered, meaning that a few people have typed that in as being
Yeah.
one of the challenges that refugee claimants face.
Great, yeah. So as I stop sharing and get Lucy to continue with the PowerPoint, I'll just note that the reason we wanted to go through this exercise together and kind of get your perspective on the challenges you see some of your clients facing is that also is kind of like the underlying guiding purpose of the curriculum writing project that we have been taking part in. Is we do have this previously underserved and vulnerable client group, and as you pointed out, some of their learning and settlement needs are distinct from other groups of newcomers. And as teachers, a lot of the materials we use were not developed with this client group in mind. And often some of the teaching materials we have carry implicit assumptions about the life circumstances about our students. One quick example is that a lot of English language, especially beginner classes, might, in a vocabulary building exercise, ask a student to do something like draw a family tree. But this would be inappropriate and damaging for students dealing with issues like family separation or the loss of loved ones due to conflict or other circumstances that refugee claimants find themselves fleeing. So our goal with the project is to help teachers recognize where those gaps are and provide a little bit of practical and theoretical guidance about how to adapt those materials and create a classroom that's welcoming and relevant to the needs of our refugee claimant clients. And so, yeah, so we saw a lot of, really apt formulations in our brainstorm there, which we're thankful for your participation for those. But I'll just quickly summarize some of the ones that we've listed, and maybe only elaborate on a few of those that might not have been listed in our brainstorm together there. So let's take a look through some of the ones we've identified. These continue. Exactly, right. So refugee claimants experience loss and trauma from their journeys to Canada, which may include the loss of family members, the loss of friends, property, freedom, legal status, and a sense of belonging. Related challenge to that would be separation anxiety disorder. A lot of refugee claimants also experience culture shock. These challenges can lead to mental health issues. Similarly, the fear and anxiety over the future, the possibility that the asylum claim that our clients are making may be rejected, gives a sense of uncertainty about the future, which can discourage refugee claimants from building real connections with their communities and having positive ambitions for their prospective new lives here. Refugee claimants experience a lot of barriers to basic life necessities, and connected to this is the experience of financial hardships. Some challenges having to do with education and literacy, and one that I don't think really came up in the chat here has to do with identity and persecution. But refugee claimants who have experienced persecution, prejudice, or human rights abuses for their identity characteristics, such as their race, faith, gender, or sexuality identifications, may sometimes internalize these identities as a source of fear or shame rather than pride or belonging. And it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of support for refugee claimants to begin to feel safe in their identities and to see them as something that are not only protected legally, but actually to be celebrated in Canada. There's, of course, the difficulties around the asylum claim hearing process and preparing for that, and the fact that it is quite prolonged. I think it takes most of our clients 2 years to go through the asylum claim process. And lastly, barriers having to do with the Canadian job market. And so this could include the difficulties of obtaining a work permit, getting used to a new job market, having credentials recognized, communications issues, and dealing with employers' potential hesitancy to hire someone who doesn't have permanent legal status. So again, we're highlighting these challenges as a way of better understanding our clients, and we're attempting to better understand our clients as a way of better serving them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the research that has been done here. This would be Andrea.
Okay, so research was done in 5 different areas. The first area was an environmental scan of resources. A comprehensive online search through BC, the Prairies, Ontario, and Maritime provinces was completed. The environmental scan revealed one key finding. There are no adequate, accessible curricula or resources designed for employment specialists, settlement workers, and language teachers to assess their services or utilize when supporting refugee claimants. Thus, the need for refugee claimant specific materials. The next type of research was done with was with the refugee claimants themselves. Interviews, focus groups, and online surveys were conducted with refugee claimant students in CLB levels from 1 to 6. 62% claimants surveyed want to see a focus on employment, survival skills, as well as hands-on communicative activities in class. The next area of research was teacher surveys. Research was conducted through online surveys. Findings discovered that teachers need more resources relevant to the real-world needs and experiences of refugee claimants. Employment themes should be a major focus. 48% of teachers reported that refugee claimant clients identify getting a job as their main purpose for studying English. Time constraints and inconsistent attendance are issues. Technology is an issue. Low digital literacy skills of students and limited access or even any access to Wi-Fi or a device such as a computer inhibits students from succeeding in class. The next area of research was settlement workers and job counselors. Talking to service provider staff who support refugee claimants allowed a different perspective on their needs, such as the need for mental health support and the difficulties addressing it. Top areas requiring support identified by support staff included basic needs such as housing and income security, as well as employment readiness or job-related skills. And the last area of research was from subject matter experts. Subject matter experts were interviewed on the topics of trauma, gender equity, sexual diversity, and literacy and learning difficulties. Some key takeaways from this research were to include in the curriculum representation of the refugee claimants' cultures and of marginalized communities in the classroom through visuals and vocabulary. Real-world experiences to support learning and increase confidence, and to provide guest speakers to connect more directly to resources and for the students themselves. So, as a recap, and now I'm going to pass it on to, I believe, is it Maha doing the first?
Yes.
Thank you,
I'm
Maha.
next, yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So thank you, Andrea. Okay. So we wanted to turn this research into action. After reviewing the field research, we've pulled together some key principles to respond directly to what we heard. These are designed to offer practical, targeted solutions that address real challenges faced by refugee claimants and the educators supporting them. Our goal was to make learning more accessible, inclusive, and effective for everyone involved. And why this matters, okay? One major key takeaway from the research is that refugee claimants in BC are incredibly diverse. They are diverse in background, experience, and learning needs. So a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. We need flexible teaching strategies that can meet learners where they are at. Why using universal design for learning as a guiding principle? UDL is a flexible framework that helps create more inclusive learning environments. It focuses on supporting learners' choices, offering varied learning options, and making sure everyone feels included and empowered. Okay, now, how does it work? UDL works in 3 ways. It uses multiple means of engagement to spark learners' interest and motivation, using culturally relevant examples to build connections and give learners the flexibility to choose topics or activities that align to their immediate needs. The second way is it uses multiple means of representation to support understanding, offering content through visuals, audio, and hands-on activities while including diverse perspectives and real-life examples that reflect learners' experiences. The third way It uses multiple means of action and expression to give learners flexible ways to show what they know, allowing different formats like presentations or visuals, and encouraging goal setting and self-reflection to build confidence and independence. So basically, by using the UDL approach, we can create learning spaces that really work for refugee claimants and the educators who support them. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. All right, so the second finding is really important. We all know that seeking refugee protection often means that claimants have gone through serious challenges in their home countries during their journey and while adjusting to life here in Canada. Many have experienced trauma, loss, anxiety, and culture shock. And all of that can deeply impact their mental health and how they show up in the classroom. So, what's the key takeaway here? We need to focus on trauma-informed practices and stay mindful of mental wellness. That means making classrooms feel safe, predictable, and supportive, and building relationships based on trust, not pressure. It is not about being a therapist, it's about being compassionate and supportive and creating a space where learners feel respected, heard, and safe enough to engage. Okay, thank you. I'll pass it to Arthur. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Arthur.
You're
Yeah,
exactly
Arthur.
right. Yeah, and so the immediate and critical needs that refugee claimants have for support with settlement, employment, and the refugee claimant process underscores the necessity for us to have a focused and accelerated curriculum that focuses on the content most relevant to the lives of refugee claimants and tries to equip them with as many of the tools as possible to successfully navigate the job market and Canadian society. So our principle coming from this is that we should be providing relevant content. And specifically, some of the ways we can do this has to do with identifying our clients' needs and establishing connections with with your students. So this has to do with getting to know your students and giving them a voice in the classroom, as well as a say in what skills and tasks you target. Specifically, one way to do this is with ongoing goal setting and needs assessments, which gives students an opportunity to have their voices heard, and it helps us as teachers craft the lessons that are most relevant to the needs of our students. We should also be prioritizing the classroom materials that actually address the unique learning needs of refugee claimants. A couple ways we can do this is to foreground some areas of thematic areas of interest and need based on our research. So as we get a little bit further into this presentation, we'll talk a bit about how we've structured the curriculum in terms of theme. But as Andrea had mentioned earlier, one of the most pressing areas, of course, is employment support, but also a lot of clients have expressed needs in areas more related to everyday life and settlement. So we want to kind of foreground the themes related to that. And we also want to, as curriculum writers, like provide you with materials related to those themes. We'll get into a little bit more detail a bit later about how we plan to provide those materials. But basically, we've identified a gap in what's been developed in terms of the educational materials that are out there don't always fit the life circumstances of refugee claimants. So we need to approach the materials that are out there critically and ask ourselves things like which parts of this link lesson, for example, might be usable in a safe haven classroom. Asking ourselves as well what life experience assumptions our materials make, and especially thinking about how to adapt the teaching materials that we have for refugee claimants. And just as a conclusion for this point is basically what we're trying to do is to give students as many as possible of the tools that they'll need for survival and settlement as they prepare for their claim hearings. Has to do with so those are some of the things that we can do in the classroom, but we also need to make sure that that our clients feel supported in their communities as well. And teachers can't possibly be equipped with all the skills and training necessary to meet all the various diverse needs of refugee claimants. But we do act as important points of contact, and usually within organizations that offer non-instructional capacities of support as well. So we believe that a collaborative, multifaceted approach to client support is really beneficial in being able to connect our students to their greater communities. And a couple ways we can do this is by bringing other voices into the classroom. So a lot of our students' needs could be best supported by teachers working closely with community organizations, guest speakers, and employment specialists. In my own experience, I know that when I've brought in employment specialists from my organization, many of my students do tend to follow up and set up one-on-one appointments and continue to work closely with career counselors, which opens the door for things like free training programs. And students are far more likely to take advantage of the resources that are there if we, as teachers, do the work of bringing these resources into the classroom. And it's true of employment support, but it's also true of things like digital skills training, libraries, community centers, things like that. So we do stress spreading out your workload and bringing in other voices to the classroom. We also recognize that a lot of student needs are non-instructional. Essentially, we may need to make ourselves aware of community resources for that meet the needs of our refugee claimants in areas like digital literacy, food security, mental health, anti-racism, and safety. And we know that teachers don't necessarily offer expertise in these areas, but you might see your students as often as almost anyone else in their lives right now. So we should be a little bit familiar with where we can point students to when they do express these kinds of needs outside of the classroom as well. And finally, we also want to just make the effort of connecting classroom learning to real world communities. And the way we can do that is by using locally relevant classroom materials to promote awareness of community resources. So language instruction, the work that we all do, plays a very important role in helping students build the tools to explore and communicate. But we should also be thinking about how else we can bridge the gaps between vulnerable refugee claimants and their new communities.
The next finding was the diverse educational backgrounds of refugee claimants necessitate a personalized approach to literacy and learning. So thinking about no two students are the same, no two classes are the same, we really need to have a personalized approach with every class, every student that is a refugee claimant. So the principle from this finding is ensure accessibility for learners with learning differences and literacy needs. Some strategies: providing varied learning options, selecting accessible language and materials, utilizing feedback from learners, and adapting available resources. As we know, right now, there are limited resources for refugee claimants, specifically in BC, but how can we adapt some resources that we do have to make them more refugee claimant focused? And we have to think outside the box. Maybe we're not going to set up our Safe Haven classes like a traditional linked classroom. What are some varied learning options that we can do to create accessibility for all of our clients? And next slide, thank you. Okay, and the final finding is embracing Canadian culture values that promote diversity and assist marginalized communities in accessing essential services will aid in a successful transition to life in Canada. So the principle created from this was foster inclusivity, diversity, and unity through culturally responsive and equitable teaching practices that create a welcoming environment for marginalized communities, including BIPOC and 2S LGBTQIA+ learners. Some strategies for this include making sure everyone is represented, celebrating those differences, finding common objectives, and emphasizing collaboration. These refugee claimants are here for a reason. Maybe they were persecuted in their home countries. We really need to foster a sense of inclusivity and welcome these students and people to Canada and celebrate the differences that they have. So now I'm going to recap the different principles. If we could go to the next slide. So the guiding principles are universal design for learning, trauma-informed practices, relevant content, community engagement, learning accessibility, and inclusivity, diversity, and unity. Please note that each of these principles is informed by a specific research finding, and the rest of the curriculum guidelines are meant to help teachers implement these principles in their teachings. We've tried to make these principles concrete and created practical, usable tools for Safe Haven classes. Thank you.
Okay.
And
I
go ahead,
think-
Maha.
Yeah, all right. Okay, I think it's time for a quiz.
Yeah.
All right, I think everybody's excited about the quiz. Okay, now that we've discussed the main findings of the research and the corresponding principles, it is time to put our knowledge to the test with a quick quiz. On this slide, you will see our 6 principles listed on the left and 12 strategies on the right. Please take a few seconds to read the strategies before we start the activity.
I put them in the chat as well, if that's
Yes,
easier
thank
for
you,
folks.
Arthur. Yeah,
Anyway.
that's great, because if it's too small for some people, they can read it in the chat. Now, your task is to match each principle with 2 strategies that best align with it. Please share the letters of your answers in the chat. So when you decide or when you choose, just write the 2 letters for each principle. Okay, so yeah, just share it in the chat. So let's start with UDL. Take a moment to choose the 2 strategies you think best match this principle. When you're ready, just share the letters of your answers in the chat.
Do you want to go on to the next one, Maha?
Okay, so the next one is trauma-informed practices. Okay, which, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, which 2 strategies do you think are most closely related to trauma-informed practices? Okay, so take a moment to choose and share the letters of your answers in the chat. I'm gonna move to the next one. Okay, so
Not the next slide. Sorry, Lucy, not the next
no,
slide.
not the next slide. Sorry, Lucy. Okay, the next principle is relevant content. Okay, so which 2 strategies do you think are most closely related to relevant content? Okay, choose 2 and share the letters of your answer in the chat, please.
And again, there may be some overlap between the different categories, between the different principles. D and J, L and D. Yeah, so a lot of differences coming up here.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I'm gonna move to the next one, community engagement, okay? So please choose 2 strategies related or aligned with community engagement and put them in the chat. Just put the letters in the chat.
Yeah, so B is coming up very strongly, but the other ones maybe some differences. B and F from Karen D.
We will move on to the next one, which is learning accessibility. Okay, please take a moment to choose and again share your answers in the chat. And the last one is inclusivity, diversity, and unity. Please choose 2 strategies that are closely related to this principle and put your answer in the chat.
Okay, so most people are jumping in with E and J. So I'm
Oh,
seeing lots of E's and J's. E and J, yes. Everyone's
Okay.
answering E and J.
very, very good. Yeah, I think you're getting most of them right. Okay, excellent. Okay. Can we reveal the answers now?
I think you can. I think you're ready to reveal the
Yes.
answers.
Okay, Lucy, can you share the answer? Yeah. Okay. So please take a moment to look at the answers here and just compare what you have selected with the answer key. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that.
And you can also reflect on how many of these things you are already doing in your classes and which ones maybe you haven't thought of, and maybe that you might want to start thinking more about.
Yeah, I'm really impressed because they got almost everything, almost all of them right. Okay, so the answers were really great.
And impressed as well with the level of participation as well. Thanks
Yeah,
everyone
yeah, thank you.
for being active in the chat and being active in the Slido previously. This is great to see. Thank you.
Okay, so you've done a great job with the matching activity and you passed the quiz, okay? But I just want to say that using these strategies in a safe haven class can really make a difference. They help meet learner specific needs, connect them to the real world experiences, and to create a more inclusive and supportive learning environment.
And I'll also add that these aren't the only ways of implementing these principles as well. And we will be supplying some materials, one of which is a checklist that we'll go into in a little bit more detail later. But we do want to kind of provide ideas for implementation in the form of strategy.
Thank you, Arthur. Yes, these are not the only strategies. When you read the guidelines, you will find more strategies. These are only examples of the strategies, and we have more in the guidelines. Okay.
Which might lead us to talking a little bit about what exactly is in the guidelines. Yeah, this is just a quick overview of what's included in the work that we've done so far. We've kind of gone over in this training the first 3 of these, going back to the introduction and context and brainstorming that we did about like who our clients are and why the need to serve them in this way. And so from now on, from this point forward in the training, we're going to really focus on the portions of the guidelines that we feel are most practical and usable for teachers to be able to just take right now and be able to use in your classroom. So those would include a lesson plan template with a checklist of possible strategies for implementing safe haven principles. We are developing resources ourselves. Oh, sorry. There is a question in the chat, and for now, we're just going to copy and paste them. We'll address the question at the end there. Sorry. So the rest of this training, we're going to kind of pull a few aspects of the guidelines that we think you can use in your classes right away, and that hopefully will support you in your teaching. The first of those, I guess we should talk about like how the curriculum is structured then. The precarity of our refugee claimants' legal statuses in Canada does necessitate an accelerated curriculum focusing on providing content relevant to the immediate needs of refugee claimant students. With such dramatic changes in life circumstances happening in such a short amount of time, BC Safe Haven teachers need to be able to prioritize the lessons that provide refugee claimants with the toolkits they'll need on their paths to settlement and survival. And we've, through research and through talking your input as well as the input of our clients, identified some of these areas as employment-related training, which would provide students with the language and skills relevant to both looking for a job and succeeding in the workforce. But then as well, language skills that are necessary for successfully navigating everyday life in a new cultural environment, which we're calling survival English or survival skills. As you can see, these include a lot of the common link themes of financial literacy, housing, health and wellness, community engagement. And we consider this this thematic group to be kind of based, let's say malleable in that selecting themes and topics and tasks from this area would be something that's based on your students' own stated learning needs or your own best observations of what your students' needs are, kind of thing. And we also identified the embedded themes of Canadian culture and digital literacy as things that should be kind of incorporated and revisited throughout throughout the course. So yeah, that's a bit of an overview of some of like the very kind of like large themes and topics. You can see it's not all that surprising or all that different from other English language learners. However, within those topics, we need to be creating tasks that are more specifically geared to the learning needs of refugee claimants, which is sort of what Maha is going to kind of give us a little bit more information about.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so Lucy, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the BC Safe Haven curriculum guidelines is based on real-world tasks specifically tailored for refugee claimants. These tasks take into account the unique circumstances faced by this group, differentiating them from other immigrants and language learners. Although some tasks may be applicable to all newcomers, others might be irrelevant or potentially triggering for refugee claimants. Therefore, it is essential to exercise caution when selecting tasks to teach in your classes. For example, in this diagram, the tasks on the left, such as filling out a transitional housing application, are directly aligned with the needs of refugee claimants. On the right, tasks like negotiating a mortgage are irrelevant and maybe even triggering due to the uncertainty surrounding their status in Canada. While refugee claimants share many language learning tasks with other newcomers, this curriculum specifically focuses on addressing their immediate and most relevant needs.
Right. So we've talked about how a lot of the feedback we've gotten from students and teachers is that the materials that are out there for teaching were not specifically geared towards the needs of our refugee claimants. You're obviously showing strong skills in choosing amongst the things that are available, kind of thing. And so we wanted to just like go over what the solutions to that issue could be, other than the solution, which is not a solution, of overburdening teachers by asking them to develop everything from scratch, kind of thing. So as we're noting that there's a lack of readily available resources for refugee claimants, one solution is that we, as the curriculum writing team, can develop some of these ourselves. And that is something that we are working on, and we do welcome suggestions the suggestion I just heard about parent-teacher interviews and things having to do with parenting, because we're trying to develop a few task packages that do meet what we see as some of the gaps in readily available teaching materials. But we also do welcome feedback of as we're developing lesson materials, if anybody has noticed specific needs from their students that they would like to see task packages developed to meet. That's something that that we can potentially take into account. So we are developing some of these task packages and skill building activities that build towards those assessment tasks. But in the meantime, we did also think it would be worthwhile to compile a list of some of the stuff that already is out there that wasn't developed specifically for refugee claimants. These are often link resources, but the ones that that seem to have the most Venn diagram overlap with the needs of refugee claimants. So we've kind of spent a bit of time collating and organizing a list of classroom materials that are relevant to some of the common learning and settlement goals of refugee claimants. And as I introduce you to that document, which we are able to share with you soon, I just want to note that these aren't the only materials you can use, and they're not materials that you have to use, and they're certainly not materials that you have to use as is. So we don't intend them to be mandatory, static, or universal, but emphasize that teachers should be conducting needs assessments and getting learning goals elicited from their students, and choosing and modifying and adapting materials to suit our own students' needs here. So something we can share with you is just a quick little overview of some of what we found that that could be useful and could meet some of the learning needs of our refugee claimant clients. And so we're calling it a resource hub. Each of these is like a link to potentially a lesson module, assessment tasks, things that you can find online and that you can access for free. Quick note on the layout and organization. We're going to organize it by theme, from employment to some of those survival English themes like health and safety, community connections, and things like that. It goes from lowest to highest CLB, and we're making a quick note of whether the material might be usable in a core Safe Haven class or in an employment Safe Haven class, or both, kind of thing. As well as a quick note of if you do see material that you would like to use, what can you expect to find there, kind of thing. So let's just quickly go through. So these are all lessons, financial literacy modules, health modules, housing, community, and a few things having to do with diversity and Canadian culture, as well as some resources to support your students in building digital skills and digital literacy. I was stressing a little bit earlier the need for supporting students outside the classroom as well. So the Resource Hub does also include some community resources, things to do with Safe Haven, non-instructional Safe Haven services, and other refugee claimant services that if your students do approach you and want to find out about registering for healthcare under the interim federal health program, this kind of shortcuts you a little bit into knowing where to send them. So this is one of the things that we are ready to share soon, and And hopefully that gives teachers something to draw from in terms of materials as we continue to develop the materials that we are developing ourselves. And I'll just quickly go over a couple other things that we can also share with you. Some team members have developed a Safe Haven lesson plan template. So this might help you with adapting a ready-made material from the Resource Hub or from elsewhere. But as you're adapting, it helps you to kind of consider and think about some of the Safe Haven principles that we've talked about, like universal design for learning, trauma-informed practices, and so on. So some embedded checklists in an template lesson plan for kind of daily, weekly planning. A more long-term checklist document that we kind of think of as like a printout that if you're in a physical classroom, you might have on your cork board, along with other reminders of PBLA and other professional development. But this is something that you can kind of refer to here and there to remind yourself of strategies for implementing some of these principles. And also, as I talked about possible ways of supporting students beyond the classroom, we also wanted to provide a couple contacts logs that would be helpful to keep kind of on file here. This first one would be for these outside of the classroom moments when a student approaches you and says, for example, like, I can't access my online class because I don't have internet at home. Then we need to kind of maybe talk to our organization and find out, do we have a computer lab? So in my case, I could say that yes, we have some loans, and I might want to write down the name of someone in the main office who could help the student borrow equipment. Similarly, being prepared with like someone in your community who could meet the mental health needs of a client if they do confide feelings of distress or otherwise show signs of things like self-harm, for example. So again, in Vancouver, I might want to refer someone to the Vancouver Association for Survivors of Torture. But again, these are going to be kind of community specific and things like that you might have to just consult service staff at your organization to help you fill out. As well as another contact log that would be more for field trips that you've done that you want to make a note of, like who you spoke with at the library, for example. And so when you have a new cohort of students and you want to revisit the same guest speaker, then you have their contact information like ready at hand here. So yeah, those are a few of the documents that we're ready to share now. And we can kind of transition here to a quick overview of like where we're at with the project and what you can expect from us in the future.
Thank you. So one thing that we haven't talked a lot about is that the curriculum is CLB and PBLA aligned, both in the core and in employment. And so what you see in the what you will see in the resources are also, wherever they can be, PBLA aligned. For the next steps of what we're doing, AMSA is currently building a website that all of the Safe Haven providers are going to have access to. And I believe Kieran said that it's just with the ministry right now for final approval. So that should be ready, hopefully fairly soon. And that's where you'll be able to access all the documents as they become available. So the ones we have available now, and then in the future, the additional things that we are developing. So that's the major part of the curriculum development that's in the works. We are also currently working on what we are calling task packages. So these are CLB PBLA aligned task packages based on real world tasks that currently there are no teaching materials out there specifically for the kinds of tasks that refugee claimants have to do that newcomers really don't have to do. So for instance, around the kind of healthcare that they are able to access, I forget what it's called now, but the temporary.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just
interim federal health plan. Interim
federal health plan.
Yeah.
This was something we learned about during our research. This is how refugee claimants who are not able to get a care card, for instance, that's the kind of healthcare they're going to access. So that is very different than all the other newcomers that if you're in a link class that you might have. So we are developing task packages for those specific real world tasks. They will not be full lesson plans like you might see developed by the Centre for Canadian Language Benchmarks. But what they will be specifically focused on a real world task. There will be assessment tools for that real world task with CLB criteria in the assessment tools. And each of the criteria that's in the tools will have an example activity and a fully developed activity that you'll be able to use. So as teachers, you will have to provide additional activities on each of that criteria for skill building, so that the students are ready to do the assessment at the end. But you will at least have one activity for each of the criteria that's in the assessment tool to be able to start you off. And these packages are developed for CLB 1 to 4 for core, and for CLB 4 to 6 in the employment-related stream of Safe Haven. So those we are working on now. That will be part of the full curriculum, and those will be available. The task packages will be available later in the fall. What you'll be able to access now are the things that Arthur was just showing, and they will be available on the website. The other thing is that, for instance, the feedback that we received today about a topic that might be very needed by a number of refugee claimants around education for their children. We are very open to receiving that information. Arthur, I think you can pop your email into the chat. And if anyone has any feedback that they want to give about what they think should be, in the curriculum that you think is not in there once you receive the list of resources that we currently have, certainly let Arthur know. And that can be something, because we're still working on the curriculum, that can be something we take a look at. As well, some of you have been working in Safe Haven, many of you for a year now. So some of you may have materials that you don't see on our list that you think would be very valuable for others to have access to. So again, if you want to send an email to Arthur, he can add that to the list of resources. It is going to be a live document. It will be updated and amended as more resources become available or as more resources become known to us. So our next steps right now are working on filling those gaps and getting the full curriculum available. After that, we will be working on some additional training on those principles where they are needed. So for instance, trauma-informed training, that will be later on, probably in the spring rather than in the fall. But things like helping clients that have literacy issues, trauma-informed training, mental health issues, those kinds of things. We will be developing short training packages on those, and those will be delivered probably sometime in the spring.
At this point, I would like to move on to just some quick closing comments. Thank you to all of our presenters for giving us such a clear explanation of the curriculum guidelines, and thank you for all your work creating and producing all of that. And thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.